Everyone. It's such amazing to have such a big turnout at midterm. Thank you so much for coming and welcome. I'm so happy to have Deborah and Baptiste here from Paris, France, as part of the Spring Lecture Series here at Knowlton. 127 AF is an architectural practice based in Paris, founded in 2020 by Deborah Feldman and Baptiste Potier. The practice works across scales and disciplines, with the smallest project published on their website at 1 square meter. As someone who's constantly confronted with the question, will I work on something bigger? I appreciate the message in the 1 square meter project, that complexity importance is not dictated by scale. I hope to see more 1 square meter projects from these two. Baptiste and Deborah pursue complementary activities that contribute to a very dynamic practice. Baptiste operates a metalwork and carpentry workshop where the office experiments and prototypes construction details at 1-to-1. His background includes studies in art and architectural history at the École du Louvre, followed by formal training in architecture. And Deborah Feldman is a PhD candidate in anthropology and architecture at Paris-Nanterre University. Her research examines the transformation of domesticity through the multi-sited ethnography of new forms of dwelling and shared intimacy fostered by the digital economy, such as Airbnb rented apartments and co-living buildings. In parallel with her research, she teaches at the Paris Est School of Architecture, where she leads a first-year design studio. It's so great to have both Deborah and Baptiste here to show their work and manners of working, so please help me in welcoming them.
So thank you very much for this introduction. Can you hear me? Is it loud enough? Yeah, it's fine. We are super grateful to be here today. It's the first time that we hear the name of our office pronounced in English. So I was wondering if you were talking about us or maybe somebody else. So yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. We are super happy to share our work with students from different horizons than students in Paris, also in order to have your feedback and maybe have a nice discussion afterwards. Yeah, maybe just a tiny introduction, but I think Stephanie already said the essential stuff. Our work is really complementary, and you will see how, on the one hand, there's this dimension which is more abstract, and how the research I do for my PhD, but also teaching, how it irrigates the projects of our office, and how Baptiste woodwork and metalwork influences our manner of drawing all the projects. And so the title of our lecture today, From the Bookshelf to the City, is a nod to a quote that Max Bill, so a Swiss architect, but also a goldsmith, an artist who was formed at the Bauhaus, said, in everything we design, we have a personal responsibility towards society. The whole environment created by us, from the spoon to the city, has to be brought into harmony with social conditions. And it's something that really resonates with our work, this sort of responsibility that we have as a profession to take as much care when we design small objects as we do when we work on a big scale and prestigious projects. But what we are also going to show later on throughout all the projects that we're going to present is that these different scales inform one another, and that our work is always a sort of going forth and back and forth movement. Things that we discover at a small scale helps us navigate on a bigger scale, and the other way around. So maybe also a tiny introduction of our office. So this is in Pantin, which is a sort of Brooklyn of Paris. We share this big industrial building with other artists and artisans, craftsmen and craftwomen. And so the office is divided in these two areas. So here you can see our workshop where we design and built prototypes and models, one-to-one scale models of our designs, and the other part which is more dedicated to all the design work and the research. And you can see here, this is the before entering the office, all the models of different projects that we are going to speak to you today.
Maybe I would add that our two profiles directly shape the way we have developed our practice and trajectory also. I would say that we didn't want to work in office after school and wanted to start directly our studio and work together. And like working and doing things by ourselves was a way to get into this kind of project, and having the opportunity to work for people that wouldn't ask us to design things, and they only asked us to design things because we were able to make them afterwards. So
yeah, it was also a sort of marketing strategy. People that would not normally call an architect, but they needed somebody to build a bookshelf, or you were going to see later on a shower. So we said, okay, but maybe if we also build them, then we can design them, and this is going to be like whole package. So this is what also sort of strategy on how do you start working when you don't have any contacts, you just finished school. I don't come from Paris, Baptiste neither, so there is no family or network available. So it's how do you start creating a portfolio, projects, references, and so on.
So here you can see the so-called 1 square meter project, as Stephanie said. It's a shower. And it's not exactly what one would call a prestigious commission or grand architecture, but it is actually where we began. And right after finishing our studies and internships, we decided to take on any project we could, and never saying no, but with a few conditions. And in this case, it was a friend of a friend who had a leaking shower in his apartment, and he had heard that I was handy. And he asked if I could do something, since he couldn't afford a regular artisan or didn't know one exactly. And I told him, okay, I will give you a good price, I will repair the shower, but you have to let me do exactly what I want. And he said yes. So instead of redoing the tiling of the shower, which will always end up leaking finally, especially in Paris with this very old wooden structure that moves across time, we decided to do something else and to use this material that you can see, which is zinc sheets that is used in Paris for covering buildings, and which is a very traditional and old-fashioned material. And we started studying the way like roofers will work with it in Paris, how they bend it and make them work together in order to get like to get it waterproof. And that's what we did in the shower. We weld the zinc sheets together and have like a very simple but efficient system of having it waterproofing the shower unity. And also it gave a special aspect to it, because the zinc will change over time, over the frequency of the humidity will goes on it. It depends on the place the humidity, the water goes on it, but you have like changes of aspect everywhere on it. And it was finally the first project that we did, and it was a 1 square meter project, as we say. This is another project from the start of our design process. With the same idea of designing and building things, we began creating various objects and pieces of furniture, always starting from very basic elements. Again, making the object ourselves allowed to us to design without having to find a rich client that would pay for it. And this design process led us in a search for simplicity and reinterpretation for ways to make something easily and affordably doable. Here on the left, you can see a standard downspout for rain evacuation, again in zinc, easy to source and easy to work with. And starting from this element, we designed this lamp that you see on the right. We cut the zinc, painted it, added a light source and a mounting tube, which we bent using a plumber pipe bender. So we also love to use like different techniques from different métiers. Craftsmanship, and we like to work with this material and objects seemingly standard and inexpensive and transforming them into something more precious. On the same idea, another project, on the left you can see a standard shelf bracket and track system. I don't know if you are familiar with this, but this is very common in France. You clip the bracket on the tracks, you put wood shelves on it, and it's very cheap and efficient, and it's used everywhere. And on the right you can see the design we end up with for shelves in a client kitchen. So first we resist the tracks into the wall, and then we place the bracket in a basic scanner with a ruler for scale, so you can see here the scan result of it. And we traced it in AutoCAD to capture the exact geometry of the connection part, and we worked the rest of the shape to create these triangular forms with geometrical shapes that you see on the right. And we then laser cut them from stainless steel sheets and assembled everything together very easily using the tracks and bracket system, and then covered everything, covered the tracks with plaster and painting to have it disappear in the wall, and finally have a very original design based on something very standard and easy to affordable. Yes.
So yeah, maybe the idea that we can see in all these different projects is that we were at the beginning of our office always working on ordinary commissions, like a lot of bathrooms. People would call us because they just needed to modify their bathroom or kitchens, or really ordinary projects with really low budgets. And it was the challenge was, how do you make something out of the ordinary? How do you experiment? And experimentation doesn't necessarily mean something that is expensive if you do it yourself. If you try to transform something that is cheap and affordable in something that becomes interesting only because you assemble it in a different way. But we also think about how ordinary commissions and how we design ordinary commissions in order to change the way certain spaces are used traditionally. And so, for example, here is a project we designed a kitchen for a young couple with 2 children in Pantin, near Paris. So they bought this brick house and they refurbished it, and then there was this empty room in the middle of the house where they didn't have any more budget to build the kitchen, and they came to us. They really wanted to work with us, and but they told us we actually don't even have the budget for an IKEA kitchen. And then we spent a lot of time with them. Their 2 young children had dinner, spent afternoons with them, and we sort of understood that this central room of the house, that this kitchen had a pivotal role in the geography also of their family. I think you can already see through the lines what I'm saying. So we have dinner, the mother is going to the improvised kitchen to cook, and then we stay in the living room. We're like, oh, maybe the kitchen we are going to build can make things work differently in the family. So we sort of understood that the design of this kitchen can sort of change also the choreography and the roles that the different members of the family are normally, traditionally assigned to. So we we started designing this. They called it the UFO, so that's why we call it the UFO kitchen. Started by creating this 1:1 scale mock-up. So this is the empty room at the beginning, she's the client. Maybe here you can see the tiny head of the toddler. And so we built this mock-up that we printed on A4 paper, and we just modified the form with them on site in order to make it fit their body and their movements, and just test it with them. And then from then on, we started like drawing it precisely, and started working on how we're going to build it. And it's also so the fact that we build it ourselves, it makes this type of design accessible to clients that wouldn't normally pay for custom-made furniture or custom-made kitchens. And it also gives us, so it makes it accessible, but it also gives us the possibility to experiment in construction techniques and see how does it work to build and put together two materials, and if we fail, there's no problem, we can try it again. So it's a different, it also gives us great freedom to test new forms in a different language. So this kitchen, we imagined it as this complex object that sort of keeps everything together, everything that you normally do in a kitchen. So this is the first base. It has 5 legs, so like 3 really thin steel bars, and a concrete foot, which also helps it keep it stabilize the structure, and a closet where all the plumbing and the electrical wires arrive. And above this, you see the grating, the white grating, which is sort of the layer of the sandwich that works for storage. So they store their food, they store their dishes, everything that you normally store in a closed closet or in a cellar goes here under the countertop. And in the countertop, we have the sink and the cooktop, which might seem like really sophisticated, but everything here is actually sourced online on second-hand websites. And we do this, it's also important, maybe I didn't show it in the first images of the office, but we do a lot of sourcing and hunting down objects like second-hand that we then keep in our office for future projects in order to render them accessible for projects like this one. Oh, the other way around. And then the last level is this stainless steel countertop where you can cook, one can cook, can wash the dishes, also sécher, dry the dishes, but also cook and have dinner. Everybody around the same furniture, and here you can see how it works. Now it's inhabited by the family. It was finished.
So I will continue with a glass house we built in Brittany, in the northwest of France. And once again, the structural system is very simple, and its origin can be traced back to a set of bookshelves we designed a few years earlier, which we'll show you first. So the shelves are made only of steel rectangles in which we cut notches to create what we call a halved joint. I don't know if you know what it is, but it's like when like two pieces are doing like some together like this. And it's very classic joint, but highly effective. And here you can see the thinness of the elements, around a 32nd of a inch, and their flexibility, which can initially feel a bit unsettling when building a bookshelf that is meant to hold a significant amount of weight. But gradually, as the horizontal elements are added, the structure becomes fully stable and very, very efficient. And the thin steel plates easily support the weight of the books, even if they are very, very thin. Knowing this and being confident in the system, we reused it for the glass house. The glass house needed to be built in a very simple and economical way, again, for a client that will never afford to hire an architect for doing this, and only hired us because we were going to build it also. And we worked directly, not only the two of us, but directly with an independent welder to help us with the construction process, but he wasn't the main contractor. He was just helping us doing it and paid day by day. And we designed each part very precisely. I had the stainless steel sheets laser cut and delivered to the site. And we assembled them step by step, like an IKEA piece of furniture, having the notched elements slotting into one another, gradually forming this thin yet very stable structure. So you can see here the notches on the part here.
You can see them here.
Yeah.
And
then we add the sheets from the top, and finally at the end you have this very thin structure.
only holding on these three pillars, and you can see here, and then it's attached to the facade of the house. Here inside is the client's kitchen. There was also, what was also important is the fact that this is the north facade, and that we were creating a glass extension, but we didn't want it to take away any of the lighting. So we used the stainless steel also because the sun from the south could reflect inside. So it became like an even lighter structure, and light does come inside. So you can see here the light from the south, the sun rays that afterwards go into the kitchen that you see in the background.
And the rest is only like L-shaped steel bars assembled together to make these frames, and like glass glued in them. Very simple, very efficient. You can easily dismantle it and remantle it, maintain it, repair it. It's like simple, and we did it like with only one guy, as we say. Maybe in a little bigger scale. Where is it? Sorry.
It's a canopy project. Should I rather use this? Okay. So this is a canopy project, and what is also funny is that we started with another bookshelf project. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's the same base, the bookshelf project at the beginning. So again, steel sheets and threaded rods that were insured in the wall, and the steel sheets were just put on them, and they are like having this shape because of their own weight and the weight of the books that we put on them. And this design that you can see here leads us to the design of the canopy that we make out as a part of a larger project to completely redesign the schoolyard, which we undertook with a landscape architect. And the goal was to remove the impermeable surface. The yard has previously been just a concrete slab, and we removed it and created new, more inclusive spaces. And the canopy is one of them. And so we chose to use, here you can see the design from the engineer calculating the structural load of the loads of the structure, and here you can see the principle of the design. So it's only massive timber columns on the as you can see. Between them there is
steel beams,
and over it you have just metal sheets, like
curved
in the same
by their own
by
weight.
Their own weight, yeah, in the same process. Here you can see the big columns that we wanted to have in wood, and like bigger than needed, just to have like a certain materiality and to have like something nice and smooth for kids, and not just very thin columns. And also to have this contrast between these big columns and the thinness of the roof. that you can see afterward. These are pictures of the construction. As you can see, everything is like manually movable and very easy to make without any machine to lever it or just doing people.
Yeah, so this is one of the pictures taken during the construction. This is the schoolyard we redesigned with the landscaper, and this is before all the vegetation was planted. But it's also an interesting maybe type of commission. It's a national program in France to try to transform all the schoolyards in spaces that are greener and that have less concrete on the floor, and it's also so at the beginning this commission was just a landscape intervention, and then we started working with a friend landscaper, and it was again sort of the same logic, buying, for example, playground games on a catalog would be very expensive, so we designed a series of furniture that we needed to call furniture, because otherwise you're not allowed to build games for children without a certain level of security labels. But what was interesting is that the teachers afterwards told us that because these sculptures didn't look like anything else the children knew in terms of playing furniture, they didn't know what were the rules, so every time they would invent other rules, and they were like, the schoolyard became really quiet because they were passing the time trying to imagine rules, and they would make it more inclusive. Anybody could play because it wasn't just for one child at a time. They decided that everybody could, so it completely changed how the schoolyards functioned, only because it was something they haven't yet apprehend. So it was interesting also to see how at the starting point it was a source of economy, but afterwards it became something that was interesting to see how they can, it's transformed by the end user, which are the children. As we were saying at the beginning, we also have a number of researches that we did at the office, parallel to my PhD research. And for instance, here is an urban study we started in 2020 with a fellow architect, Milena Charby, a photographer, Rebecca Dubner, and a sanitation worker, Olivier Charlec. You maybe know, but in France, there's a system where if you want to throw out, for example, a bookshelf or your entire living room, you can take an appointment on the City Hall website, and the next morning sanitation workers come and pick up everything that you left in front on the sidewalk. But there's also a great amount of illegal dumping because the systems exist and because the sanitation workers go around Paris in order to take all these bulky objects. And so we were sort of fascinated by all these like urban sculptures and all this furniture that you can get from the street, but then following these objects around Paris, we sort of understood that it's like a sort of phenomenon at a bigger scale. And then we met Olivier Charlec, the sanitation worker, who introduced us to the system they use in the Department of Sanitation, where they create enormous amounts of maps. So they cartography Paris through this all these different types of misuse. It can be illegal dumping, it can be urine, it could be cigarettes or canine feces, and they have maps of all these different addresses in Paris where we do where Parisians just don't use the city as they should. But it was interesting to us because we said, well, how many of these black spots, they call it black spots, these addresses, how many are they? And they gave us the entire list, and we went to visit and survey 1,412 of these addresses, because we said to ourselves, well, that if Parisians feel at ease to use the Parisian streets in order to loiter and leave or their bulky objects, that means that the morphology of the urban tissue has something that invites them to do that. So you could see maybe that means that there's square meters that are available. Maybe there's something to learn about this. So we went and we precisely surveyed all of these addresses by drawing like the everything around it, like the architecture, the volume, and all the objects that were at a certain point left in these black spots. And we worked also with Rebecca Dopter, the photographer, that helped us to capture like the feeling of the spots, the fact they're mostly in they don't have sun, they're mostly in the shadow, that there was always a sort of difference in the pavement, that was also the change in ownership. It's private space, sometimes it's public space. So we started analyzing and creating like an enormous Excel spreadsheet where we would take pictures of the different spaces and describe them, and have like sanitation workers tell us stories of what happens in each of these addresses. And then we understood that there are a certain number of elements that repeat themselves, and that there's something in the morphology of the spaces that creates a pattern. So we understood, and we tried to classify this enormous amount of data in 8 typologies. So there's the recess, the moment when either parts of one facade is recessed from the alignment of all the other facades on a street, or there was a change in the urban regulation, and then from a certain point they wanted to enlarge certain streets, so the buildings that are more recent are recessed. The blank walls, so walls that they maybe waited for a new building to be built, so they don't have any openings, and finally nothing happens. Urban installations, infrastructures, dead-end alleys, street corners, sheltered spaces, and fences. And basically all of this, what they all have in common is the fact that they don't really belong to anybody. So they're no man's land. They give this feeling that if you leave your loiter, nobody is going to react, or nobody is going to watch you do it. So we understood that even in a dense city like Paris, there are certain spaces that have this feeling that you can do whatever you want. So we've drawn like this precise survey of each of these addresses, also to be able to quantify and to understand what's the exact area. So we are somewhere around 200,000 square meters of available square meters in Paris. And we understood that some are like here maybe only 20 square meters, but others were like 150 square meters. So we said, well, it's not just a matter of cleaning them, but it's also a sort of potential to transform the city through microarchitecture or like acupuncture, and trying to see how this can transform the urban fabric at a larger scale. So here are some examples of the addresses we've drawn. And then we imagined different sort of toolkit of actions. Half of them are material, half of them are immaterial, of how we can transform this urban fabric. So already just talk about this phenomenon, explain why it happens, analyze how the genesis of going into the archives and try to comprehend at what time in history this space is formed. Compensate, create other exutory ways to recuperate these bulky objects. Design with sanitation workers. We understood they have such a deep and precise knowledge of the city and how it is used, and it would be interesting to have them around the table when we design. fragments of the city, maintain, how it needs to be constantly maintained, otherwise it can really quickly degrade. Fill, simplify or subtract, open up, plant, and why not do nothing about it, because it's also part of how we perceive and why we also love Paris that much. It's because these objects exist, like urban sculptures, a little bit everywhere. And then we published this research in 2023, and afterwards the City Hall of the 4th Central Districts in Paris contacted us and gave us an address, a precise address. You can see this gable blind wall and really long facade on the all along the sidewalk. They were really sad that even if it's like a really nice facade, people that live in the neighborhood always leave their loiter this facade. And we started working by building a really precise model, because so it's the Marais, the center of Paris, which is like a really beautiful urban tissue. It has like middle-aged buildings, but also 17th, 18th century. Everything works together. The streets are really narrow. And we said, okay, we're going to build something there. It needs to be like a sort of jewel. It has to be like really precise. It has to work perfectly with everything around it. So we built like this model where we built the furniture, the vegetation, all the details of the different facades that open up to this address. And then we started working in building up mock-ups to see how would that work on this corner of the street. So you can see here the different tests we did for the project and the really precise model. And it was also a matter of comprehending on a really detailed view how the sidewalk works, all the networks, underground networks, but also the urban reglementation that decides there's like a minimum width on the sidewalk that you need to leave accessible, but also the roots of the trees nearby and everything, and how this corner of the street works. So we understood quickly, there's like, you can see the blue behind, like this is like what is the area we could occupy. And then we started exploring on different designs for lightweight structures that could be disassembled and maybe installed somewhere else. And it's also, we cannot build on public space like forever. You need to be able to transform it. So this is different designs we build, and the model also help us to try to imagine how this works on site.
It's important to say that this black spot, as so-called, exists also because they are very complex places that have like networks underneath, vegetation that don't belong to only one person, but sometimes there are like multiple owners, the city, the private properties, and all this makes complex places very hard to deal with.
Yeah, because you don't know, it's also regulation. It's not, there's no regulation for public space. Public space is normally, I mean, there are rules, but it's the city hall that transforms there. There's open competitions. Otherwise, the regulations are for private plots if somebody wants to build. So here is like a sort of gray area. How do we transform the spaces? Who do we speak to? What are the rules we need to abide to?
So it has to be very custom-made, tailor-made almost. And it also depends on politics, and actually now the project is on pause because we are waiting for the election, and maybe it will start again after the election, and maybe not. It's just also a part of the architectural work to be like politically.
And it's also, it happened in Paris at a certain point where media would speak a lot about the fact that Paris is not clean enough, and it needs to improve. And we had a lot of weight because people were asking, so well, how are you going to solve this problem? And we always said, we don't think it's a problem, and we are not here to solve it. So that's why one of the answers was to do nothing about it. Like a lot of city halls just plant pots of flowers just to try to fill up the space where people normally leave their loiter. And we said, well, we don't think it should work like this. We think we can solve this on maybe work this on a big scale, but doing like really precise study for each address. For example, here, we also thought about, we made a lot of proposals. I didn't really go into detail. Also in terms of program. So here we proposed a thick display case because right near there's the Pompidou Center that is going to close down for 5 years. And we said, well, if there's an arrangement with Pompidou or other galleries, this could be a display for artwork, but there's also an elementary school nearby, just the building near it, and maybe it could also be a space where drawings of the children can be exposed. We said these are crumbs of land with huge potential. It shouldn't just be space that we need to fill up in order to control how it's used. It can be something we can transform and use for the city and for the residents around it. So yes, these are a couple of images. And so this research is sort of like a way of seeing Paris, but another way of seeing Paris is what I'm doing in my PhD. So you can see here on the right side a map of Paris, almost the same scale, but this time it's not public space, it's private space. So my research is on domestic architecture. I'm interested in knowing how intimacy and how our way of inhabiting our homes changed because of or with the arrival of digital technologies. And I have more different case studies. One of them is the Airbnb platform. So I started studying it sort of 10 years ago when I was doing my master's thesis. And I started looking around apartments on the Airbnb platform. 10 years ago, Airbnb was basically just like houses that were rented by people that lived in the house. There wasn't like empty IKEA apartments. They were like really authentic with interiors, really intimate openings to how Parisians live. And I used to go on the platform and analyze the apartments through these images. I used to do what architecture historians do while analyzing objects of civilization, like paintings, sculptures, engravings, or literature. I would do the same with the Airbnb platform and try to go inside how we live with Airbnb. I was interested to know how does it transform our way of designing our place in order to be able to host somebody that we don't know. And now, so 10 years later, the Airbnb platform has different typologies. You can rent an entire house, but you can also have a private room. So the private rooms are those those apartments that interest me because the person who rents the apartment basically lives with you throughout your stay, and then you really have to deal with this intersection of private life and the presence of strangers that live with you all the time. So I started doing immersive work, like ethnography. This is like the anthropology dimension of my research. I went and spent nights with 10 Airbnb hosts, and I chose different typologies of apartments and also different typologies of hosts. Some had like huge houses, and here you can see the parts that I occupied in their apartment. Some had like 2-story apartments, and I literally had my bedroom and my bathroom separate part of their apartment, but in other cases, it was just a studio, and I would share like a couch, and we were only separated by a bookshelf. So it's really different ways of inhabiting, but what was interesting is that the hosts use the Airbnb platform in order to be able to stay in their houses and keep paying rent and not be forced to move out. And so I was interested in seeing everything that they make and create in order to sort of deal with these different thresholds of intimacy and public, how sometimes the room, which is the space you would imagine the most public, becomes the space that is shared, because the room is where the guests come in, and the living room becomes sort of a sanctuary, because the hosts just transform it as their like minimum life unit, and they live in their living room, and everything else becomes a shared space. So I was interested to see how this transforms and creates different typologies, and it's something that I also do in school with my first-year students. So I teach first-year students, and for example, here it was a housing project, and I asked them before starting to design this collective housing was the first assignment was to imagine the biography of the person that were supposed to live together. So I asked them to write a text and present an image of what they imagine would be their interior. So this is really important for us, trying to get into the mind and the point of view of the future inhabitants or the people we work with, and trying to have like this interior way of starting the project and the design process. And maybe the last project is a house we worked on.
Yeah, so at the intersection of these scales and approaches, both constructive and theoretical, as we try to show you, we'll conclude with a residential project, the extension of a small house in the suburb of Paris, in Bagnolet. And as you can see, this was originally a very small house, the first of a row of 4 terraced houses. It was a very modest structure, probably a workshop at the beginning, and that has been converted into a home. And the house sits back from the streets, and access is through a narrow corridor that cuts through the building facing the street. So it's quite a constrained site, very close neighbors, difficult access for bringing in materials, and an existing structure that was relatively fragile. From the start, we knew we had to intervene very carefully. The clients were a young couple who had just had their second child and simply needed more space. At the time, the ground floor was one open living, kitchen and dining area, and upstairs there were 2 very small bedrooms and a tiny bathroom tucked under the roof. The ground floor felt quite dark, as you can see, and upstairs the rooms were really tight. And the client initial idea was to modify the roof shape to gain more usable space in the bedroom. We began imagining a project that could respond to their needs, while also respecting the fragile existing structure, the close neighbors, the strict zoning regulation, and also a very small budget. We also understood that the upper space we were creating was going to be filled with light and very nice volume, and that it didn't make much sense to keep the living room on the dark ground floor, which was actually perfect to host the bedrooms. So we removed the existing roof that was in tiles, so it was quite heavy, and we introduced 2 steel trusses to support a new lightweight timber structure that you can see. So the steel trusses are here. On the top you can see the timber structure, very, very lightweight. And the whole thing was then clad in slate, and every single piece had to be small enough to be carried by hand and fit through that narrow passage from the street. As usual, we spent a lot of time on site with the contractor, a very affordable team but not very autonomous. And we actually designed every single piece one by one. We worked closely with them to assemble the structural system. And here you can see the construction site with the existing parts in bricks and the timber part over it. And it's a glimpse of what the space is going to be. And here you can see the space now. So we decided to keep the trusses exposed and painted.
And the structural logic was also to let clients potentially create extra half level, a mezzanine. Initially in the project they wanted to have like a little working space. Everybody lived the COVID area, so everybody's like, yeah, but maybe have a tiny workspace. And we said, okay, why not? We can construct it above the living room. And then they didn't have the budget to do it now, but it was also a matter of creating this steel structure that gives them the possibility of later on adding extra space without, the family will evolve, but adding extra space without needing to move out or do significant work. So you can see here the living room. We actually didn't modify the space, where the stair was. We tried to do like the minimal intervention. We changed everything inside the house, but they didn't really have the budget for that initially. So it was a matter of how do you keep everything, like essential things in place and still change how the house works. So this is the facade. You can see here this line is the slope of the previous roof and the extension above it, and the two windows that we added that have the same form and the same shape, the same dimension as the existing windows of the house. And this is the bathroom on the ground floor right as you enter, and we really were keen on having natural light in the bathroom and creating this opening that you were going to see in the living room.
And the opening, for example, is like the cheapest way to do it. Like we kept the structure of the flooring, but just remove the upper part just to have the light entering. But it's very simple and very low budget to do.
Yeah, you can see here.
We also reused the previous Veluxes that were on the previous roof, and
the windows,
just add new ones and make a composition.
The same with the kitchen. We actually reused the lower part of the kitchen and only built the upper parts to adapt it to the new volume. So everything that we used was already somehow there previously. Voilà.
Thank you so much, Baptiste, Deborah. Thank you. That was really, really wonderful. I'm excited for the questions from the audience. I know that's been on the rise. Your inquisitiveness is welcome. So any questions, please.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, since the number was so huge of like the black spots that you found, or that was like in the map, how did you narrow it down to those 8 specific ones?
Well, after drawing, I'm getting there. So after drawing each one of them with this precise type of like measuring the existing architecture around it and then creating this black gradient, because also we didn't really know what this exact surface is, because sometimes there's a lot of objects but sometimes there's just like a bookshelf, so that's why we use the black gradient. and we created a sort of average to calculate the surface. But once we started drawing like really precisely all of these addresses, we understood that there was something that was recurrent. Like sometimes, every time, we created categories, and then we said, oh, this can all go in one family, and this is similar, and this is similar. So we just draw all the addresses and then printed them on A4 papers and just put everything on the wall, and then said, oh, this looks similar, let's put everything here, and this is more like this. And so we created like families, and then this is how this enormous spreadsheet worked. We always also had like Google Street View image of them, so just in order to see how does this work. And what was interesting is that these different typologies are everywhere in all the 20 districts of Paris. And for example, the fence can be a fence of a gated community, but can also be the fence of like projects housing. It's the same object, but it's in different social neighborhoods, but it still has the same function for loitering. Yeah.
Across history, also we have like recesses from like Middle Age, and also recesses from a more modernist period, as you can see here, for example. So it really crossed times and
it became something like really morphological, and even if we regarded it, looked at it like in precisely, let's comprehend the history of this building, or why did we build it this way at some point in time. At the end of the day, it was something that came from the form of this tissue that made it be used as it is.
And also on this slide, you can see that it's a recess, but also a blank wall. So it's not that simple. Sometimes the categories mixes. And
yeah, this is also a blank. This is a blank wall, but it's also a recess. What's interesting, for example, here, and the reason why we drawn everything really precisely is that we weren't sort of like detectives. Everything you find in public on the street is a sort of indice, hint, index, tells you something about how it was built. For example, here we know that this is where the private property ends. It doesn't actually end at where the facade ends. So this is interesting because the person who owns the building is in charge of how this space is used, and so the sanitation workers normally are not supposed to clean up on the spaces. So it's also this invisible lines that draw the city between what is private and what is public, that if we don't look at like really in an attentive manner, you might not really understand why they're here. So here is the same. This is underneath the building, and you can see like the pavement changes because this is private property, but there's also, so this is covered space, but it's also a blind wall, so it has, it can be in two categories also, No. Yeah, this is actually, we weren't really, so as I said, they really wanted to find a solution, and we were really not really eager to go in that direction. So we sort of presented it as a toolkit. And this toolkit was also something that we were inspired by different artists or different architects that approached this type of subjects at certain times in history, and we took them as examples for Gordon Martha Clark that created fake properties that took pictures and draw strips of land that were not used and created this inventory, was one of our examples for show, the power of just showing and speaking about this phenomenon and how it transforms the way you see them and you perceive them. And it's funny because a lot of people that read our book said, wow, I just see everything around me when I walk through the Paris streets differently because you talked about it, and now I observe these spaces that you don't observe otherwise. So it's sort of also taking areas that are invisible, making them visible just changes the way we use space also. But it's, and also the work of Mierle, Lederman, Ukilis that work with the Department of Sanitation in New York City, and she did all these performances where she shakes hands of all the department, all the sanitation workers in order to give value to their knowledge of the city and the work they do in order to maintain it, and how their work is invisible, but without them, nothing would function. So these actions are not really, they don't work with one typology, and we wanted to avoid this. We found a solution. We wanted to be just trying to explain the fact that each address has like a really specific reason it was created, and it needs to have a really specific answer.
Here you can see that it's impossible to solve like easily. You have to be very specific and understand the place, understand the shape of it, and maybe you can't do anything, and maybe you can just let it as it is.
Yeah. And it's also, this is another example, you have the blind wall, but you have also all these urban furniture here that are added one after the other, because there's like one administration that wants you to not park your car, then another administration that wants you to avoid another use, and finally urban space becomes like accumulation of actions that are interdit? Forbidden.
Addition, but could you describe a little bit the roof condition?
Yeah.
Is it before? Yeah, it's before.
Maybe avant.
Attends, ça?
Non.
Ici?
Avant,
Oui.
encore. Avant.
Tu veux le détail?
Oui, ça. So maybe you can see the detail of it. So it's the system that we discussed, we talked to you about, of the two sheets of steel that are crossing each other. And on the top of it, there is this little part which is welded on the structure, as you can see here. So it blocks the structure. And this has a extruded, I don't know how to say it, like a bolt welded in it, and the two bars that maintain the glass are just screwed together with this, and there is only caoutchouc joints between the bars, and this is the same approach. It's very easy to understand and do, and we did it with the welder guy. Just together, putting the glass
and actually the form of the extension. So yeah, on the plan we forgot the most important actor of this extension, this acacia tree that is supposed to be here. And it's because of this acacia tree that we needed to go on the diagonal, because we wanted to keep the tree that we didn't draw. This is a nice lesson of what you should not do in school. You need to draw on your plans the important elements of your project. Here is the tree that is missing. So this is the reason we chose to go on a diagonal, because the tree was here, and then we had like this really pragmatic grid that is created. You can see here that is parallel to the facade, and then we wanted to avoid having like a gutter, or so the water is just going towards the facade. Here you can see, actually, if I go on both of these facades here and here, water is collected, and in the angle here, so you can see here the two gutters, the water is collected, and here we have just a vertical, which it looks exactly as this, one of these steel pillars, but it's in the angle of the project here. It's a fourth vertical line, and water is collected. So it's just because we didn't want to have like a heavy element here that collects the water. The water just goes towards the house and then is collected. Yeah.
Now you can see it on the...
you can see it here, yeah. Yeah.
And you can also open completely the facade. That was also a demand of the client that wanted to be able to also like take eat outside or inside and be able to change.
Yeah, this completely opens. All the doors can completely open. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
Question on this particular project. Does the metal and the glass ever meet, or is that like an airspace between the roof?
Yeah. It's not insulated. It's really open.
It's not
to
airtight.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good question.
It's very interesting to see the different jumps in scale that people work in, just at smaller scales, how bookshelves inform the kind of steel put together of the structure, or just other small scale things like aluminum tube making lighting and stuff like that. And kind of going off at the beginning where you talked about going kind of fresh out of school and kind of no context, how you work your way into these smaller scales, kind of informing your own work at these smaller scales and turning them from what seem like things into more larger objects that are actually kind of like habitable. I was wondering what kind of gives you that confidence at that smaller scale to kind of take those jumps to the bigger scale kind of structures or things you're
But it's trial and error.
Just
we built it ourselves, the first bookshelf, and it's and then we designed it. We did the same thing for the glass extension. We built it, and we were on. And then I don't know if there are any adaptations we did on site.
Yeah, probably. Actually, this is also something that we are able to do because we are doing it ourselves. It's taking decision all the time. I mean, all architects will do that during construction site, but it's always more difficult when you have to deal with contractors that will charge you because you are changing the plans, the initial plans. So if you are doing it by yourself or with someone, it's easy to change, and that's also what we do all the time. Maybe we should have more.
It's definitely an alternative model, and we experience this now going like little by little on bigger scale or public projects, that it becomes even more and more complex, because when you work on public projects, you need to have a series of obviously insurance and everything, but also they need to work with agreed contractors, and the contractors always dimension everything two times bigger because they want to be sure that there's no surprise. So it's always a sort of fight of, no, this needs to be this thin, otherwise. So I think it's what's also really important is to create a team of engineer and people you work with that have sort of the same mindset and then can accompany you. But this is like we spend a lot of our time trying to find the right people to work with. Yeah. It's really precious, important. Yeah.
And maybe what's happened now that we are working on bigger scale, even for the canopy that is not that big, but that we had to work with a proper contractor because it was a public space, is that now that we have this experience, we know how to design very precisely things, and we draw a lot. We have like very big files of drawings and sending them to the companies so that we are sure that they will understand the way we think and also give us good prices because they understand how easy it is to do it, which is not always the case. Sometimes they just don't know how they will do it, so they just put a big price on it and then they will see. So if you want to get good prices and be able to do the project, you have to be very precise and show them how easy it is to do, how it is calculated to don't have a lot of rest of materials, which is also a big...
Actually, the dimensions of these, the distance between the elements, we calculated it in order to be sure it's only one steel plate, and we take the maximum and then we curve it. So it's also a matter of, because we have in mind the construction process, we draw it in order to be efficient in terms of the materials we use and not having to readapt like during construction. We obviously do, but yeah.
Maybe
Tu cherches quoi?
the kitchen. Here you can see those are the dimension of the steel sheet you can use usually easily in France, and so we arrange the design to make sure that we are going to use only one sheet of metal, which is like the most costly part of the kitchen. And even this, if you like are able to see, you have to return one of them to have them together. They are not in the same sided on the steel. So we were hoping both sides will be exactly the same aspect, because otherwise we would have like a very big difference between the two. So you can see that there is a wood
here, yeah.
This is MDF part, and the steel is just glued on it.
Above it. Yeah.
Above it.
Yeah, you can see it here. No, the steel, there's a joint. They're just glued on one big wood plate.
The junction is not in the same place.
It's
with
white.
The wood and,
it's white and it's a little bit recessed.
Maybe.
Attends, là, yeah, you can
here
see
you can see the wood.
So this is the wood, and then you have the steel above it.
Maybe tu peux montrer la couture. Some point. Here you can see the.
You can see it a tiny bit here.
Yeah.
Okay, if there are no other questions, thank you so much. Again, Deborah and
Thank
Baptiste,
you.
thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.